Part 1, Chapter 2, C, of The Adventures of Jimmie Dale. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. The Adventures of Jimmie Dale by Frank L. Packard. Reading by Maire Rhode. Part 1, The Man in the Case. Chapter 2, C, by proxy concluded. Jimmie Dale's range of acquaintanceship was wide, from the upper strata of the St. James Club to the elite of New York's gangland, and, adored by the one, he was trusted implicitly by the other, not understood perhaps by the latter, for he had never allied himself with any of their nefarious schemes, but trusted implicitly through long years of personal contact. It had stood Jimmie Dale in good stead before, this association, where, in a sort of strange, carefully guarded exchange, the news of the underworld was common property to those without the law. To New York in its millions, the murder of Metzer the stool-pigeon would be unknown until the city rose in the morning to read the sensational details over the breakfast table. Here it would already be the topic of whispered conversations. Here it had probably been known long before the police had discovered the crime. Especially would it be expected to be known to Pete Lazanis, commonly called the Runt, who was a power below the deadline and, more pertinent still, one in whose confidence Jimmie Dale had rejoiced for years. Jimmie Dale, as Larry the Bat, a euphonious moniker bestowed possibly because this particular world knew him only by night, began a search for the Runt. From one resort to another he hurried, talking in the accepted style through one corner of his mouth to hard-visaged individuals behind dirty, reeking bars that were reared on equally dirty and foul-smelling, sawdust-strewn floors, visiting dance halls, secretive back rooms, and certain Chinese pipe joints. But the Runt was decidedly elusive. There had been no news of him, no one had seen him, and this after fully an hour had passed since Jimmie Dale had left Carruthers in front of Moriarty's. The possibilities, however, were still legion, numbered only by the numberless dives and dens sheltered by that quarter of the city. Jimmie Dale turned into Chatham Square, heading for the Pagoda dance hall. A man loitering at the curb shot a swift, searching glance at him as he slouched by. Jimmie Dale paused in the doorway of the Pagoda and looked up and down the street. The man he had passed had drawn a little closer. Another man in an apparently aimless fashion lounged a few yards away. "Something's up," muttered Jimmie Dale to himself. "Lansing of headquarters, and the other looks like Milray." Jimmie Dale pushed in through the door of the Pagoda. A bedlam of noise surged out at him. A tin-pan piano and a mandolin were going furiously from a little raised platform at the rear. In the center of the room a dozen couples were in the throes of the tango and the bunny hug. Around the sides, at little tables, men and women laughed and applauded and thumped time on the tabletops with their beer mugs, while waiters, with beer-stained aprons and unshaven faces, juggled marvelous handfuls of glasses and mugs from the bar beside the platform to the patrons at the tables. Jimmie Dale's eyes swept the room in a swift, comprehensive glance, fixed on a little fellow, loudly dressed, who shared a table halfway down the room with a woman in a picture hat. And a smile of relief touched his lips. The Runt at last! He walked down the room, caught the Runt's eyes significantly as he passed the table, kept on to a door between the platform and the bar, opened it, and went out into a lighted hallway, at one end of which a door opened onto the street, and at the other a stairway led above. The Runt joined him. "What's de row, Larry?" inquired the Runt. "Nothin' much," said Jimmie Dale. "Only I thought I'd let youse know. I was passin' Moriarty's and got a tip. Say, some guys croaked Jake Metzer dere." "Aw, forget it," observed the Runt airily. "Dat's stale. Was wise to dat hours ago." Jimmie Dale's face fell. "But I just came from dere," he insisted, "and de harness bulls only just found it out." "Mebbe," grunted the runt, "but Metzer got his early in de afternoon, see?" Jimmie Dale looked quickly around him, and then leaned toward the runt. "What's de lay, runt?" he whispered. The runt pulled down one eyelid, and with his knowing grin, the cigarette, clinging to his upper lip, sagged down in the opposite corner of his mouth. Jimmie Dale grinned, too. In a flash, inspiration had come to Jimmie Dale. "Say, runt," he jerked his head toward the street door, "what's de fly cops doin' out dere?" The grin vanished from the runt's lips. He stared for a second wildly at Jimmie Dale, and then clutched at Jimmie Dale's arm. "De what?" he said hoarsely. "De fly cops," Jimmie Dale repeated in well simulated surprise. "Dey was dere when I come in, Lansing and Milray, and—" The runt shot a hurried glance at the stairway, and licked his lips as though they had gone suddenly dry. "My God, he gasped, and shrank hastily back against the wall beside Jimmie Dale. The door from the street had opened noiselessly, instantly. Black forms bulked there, then a rush of feet, and at the head of half a dozen men, the face of Inspector Clayton loomed up before Jimmie Dale. There was a second's pause in the rush, and in the pause, Clayton's voice, in a vicious undertone: "You two ginks open your traps and I'll run you both in." And then the rush passed, and swept on up the stairs. Jimmie Dale looked at the runt. The cigarette dangled limply. The runt's eyes were like a hunted beast's. "Dey got him," he mumbled. "It's Stace Morse. He come to me after croakin' Metzer, and he's been hidin' up dere all afternoon." Stace Morse, known in gangland as a man with every crime in the calendar to his credit, and prominent because of it. Something seemed to go suddenly queer inside of Jimmie Dale. Stace Morse! Was he wrong after all? Jimmie Dale drew closer to the runt. "You're givin' me a steer, ain't youse?" he spoke again from the corner of his mouth, almost inaudibly. "Are you sure it was Stace croaked Metzer? What fer? How'd yer know?" The runt was listening, his eyes strained toward the stairs. The hall to the street was closed, but both were quite well aware that there was an officer on guard outside. "He told me," whispered the runt. "Metzer was fixin' ter snitch on him ter night. They've got de goods on Stace, too. He made a bum job of it." "Why didn't he get out of the country then when he had a chance, instead of hanging around here all afternoon?" demanded Jimmie Dale. "He was broke," the runt answered. "We was gettin' de coin fer him ter fade away with her tonight, and—" A revolver shot from above cut short his words. Came then the sound of a struggle, oaths, the shuffling tread of feet, but in the dance hall the piano still rattled on, the mandolin twanged, voices sang and applauded, and beer mugs thumped time. They were on the stairs now, the officers half carrying, half dragging someone between them, and the man they dragged cursed them with utter abandon. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Jimmie Dale caught sight of the prisoner's face. Not a prepossessing one, villainous, low-browed, contorted, with a mixture of fear and rage. "It's a lie! A lie! A lie!" the man shrieked. "I never seen him in me life, blast you! Curse you! D'yer hear?" Inspector Clayton caught Jimmie Dale and the runt by the collars. "There's nothing to interest you around here," he snapped maliciously. "Go on now, beat it!" and he pushed them toward the door. They had heard the disturbance in the dance hall now, and the occupants were swarming to the sidewalk. A patrol wagon came around the corner. In the crowd, Jimmie Dale slipped away from the runt. Was he wrong after all? A fierce passion seized him. It was Stace Morse who had murdered Metzer, the runt had said. In Jimmie Dale's brain the words began to reiterate themselves in a sing-song fashion. It was Stace Morse. It was Stace Morse. Then his lips drew tight together. Was it Stace Morse? He would have given a good deal for a chance to talk to the man, even for a minute. but there was no possibility of that now. Later, tomorrow perhaps, if he was wrong after all. Jimmie Dale returned to the sanctuary, removed from his person all evidences of Larry the Bat, and from the sanctuary went home to Riverside Drive. In his den there, in the morning after breakfast, Jason, the butler, brought him the papers. 3-inch headlines in red ink screamed, exulted, and shrieked out the news that the Gray Seal, in the person of Stace Morse, fence, yeggman, and murderer, had been captured. The public, if it had held any private admiration for the one-time mysterious crook, could now once and forever disillusion itself. The Gray Seal was Stace Morse, and Stace Morse was one of the dregs of the city's scum, a pariah, an outcast, with no single redeeming trait to lift him from the ruck of mire and slime that had strewn his life from infancy. The face of Inspector Clayton, blandly self-complacent, leaped out from the paper to meet Jimmie Dale's eyes, and with it a column and a half of perfervid eulogy. Something at first like dismay, the dismay of impotency, filled Jimmie Dale, and then cold, leaving him unnaturally calm. The old, merciless rage took its place. There was nothing to do now but wait. Wait until Carruthers should send that photograph. Then, if after all he were wrong, then he must find some other way. But was he wrong? The notebook that Carruthers had given him, open at the sketch he had made of Clayton, lay upon the desk. Jimmie Dale picked it up. He had already spent quite a little time over it before breakfast, and examined it again minutely, even resorting to his magnifying glass. He put it down as a knock sounded at the door, and Jason entered with a silver card tray. From Carruthers already? Jimmie Dale stepped quickly forward, and then Jimmie Dale met the old man's eyes. It wasn't from Carruthers. It was from her. "The same shuffer brought it, Master Jim," said Jason. Jimmie Dale snatched the envelope from the tray and waved the other from the room. As the door closed, he tore open the letter. There was just a single line. "Jimmy, you haven't failed, have you?" Jimmie Dale stared at it. Failed? Failed her? The haggard look was in his face again. It was the bond between them that was at stake. The Gray Seal, the bond that had come, he knew, for all time in that instant, to mean his life. "God knows," he muttered hoarsely, and flung himself into a lounging chair, still staring at the note. The hours dragged by. Luncheon time arrived and passed, and then by special messenger the little package from Carruthers came. Jimmie Dale started to undo the string, then laid the package down, and held out his hands before him for inspection. They were trembling visibly. It was a strange condition for Jimmie Dale either to witness or experience, unlike him, foreign to him. "This won't do, Jimmy," he said grimly, shaking his head. He picked up the package again, opened it, and from between two pieces of cardboard took out a large photographic print. A moment, two. Jimmie Dale examined it, used the magnifying glass again, and then a strange gleam came into the dark eyes, and his lips moved. "I've won," said Jimmie Dale, with ominous softness. "I've won." He was standing beside the rosewood desk, and he reached for the phone. Carruthers would be at home now. He called Carruthers there. After a moment or two he got the connection. "This is Jimmie, Carruthers," he said. "Yes, I got it. Thanks." "Yes. Listen, I want you to get Inspector Clayton and bring him up here at once." "What? No. How? Why, tell him you're going to run a full page of him in the Sunday edition, and you want him to sit for a sketch. He'd go anywhere for that. Yes. Half an hour. Yes. Good-bye." Jimmie Dale hung up the receiver, and hastily now began to write upon a pad that lay before him on the desk. The minutes passed. As he wrote, he scored out words and lines here and there, substituting others. At the end he had covered 3 large pages with, to anyone but himself, an indecipherable scrawl. These he shoved aside now, and very carefully, very legibly, made a copy on fresh sheets. As he finished, he heard a car draw up in front of the house. Jimmie Dale folded the copied sheets neatly, tucked them in his pocket, lighted a cigarette, and was lolling lazily in his chair as Jason announced, "Mr. Carruthers, sir, and another gentleman to see you." "Show them up, Jason," instructed Jimmie Dale. Jimmie Dale rose from his chair as they came in. Jason, well-trained servant, closed the door behind them. "Hello, Carruthers. Hello, Inspector," said Jimmie Dale pleasantly, and waved them to seats. "Take this chair, Carruthers." He motioned to one at his elbow. "Glad to see you, Inspector. Try that one in front of the desk. You'll find it comfortable." Carruthers, trying to catch Jimmie Dale's eye for some sort of a cue and failing, sat down. Inspector Clayton stared at Jimmie Dale. "Oh, it's you, eh?" His eyes roved around the room, fastened for an instant on some of Jimmie Dale's work on an easel, came back finally to Jimmie Dale, and he plumped himself down in the chair indicated. "Thought you was more'n a cub reporter," he remarked with a grin. "You were too slick with your pencil. Pretty fine studio you got here. Carruthers says you're going to draw me." Jimmie Dale smiled, not pleasantly, and leaned suddenly over the desk. "Yes," he said slowly, a grim intonation in his voice. "Going to draw you, true to life." With an exclamation, Clayton slewed around in his chair, half rose, and his shifty eyes, small and cunning, bored into Jimmie Dale's face. "What do you mean by that?" he snapped out. "Just exactly what I say," replied Jimmie Dale curtly. "No more, no less. But first, not to be too abrupt, I want to join with the newspapers in congratulating you on the remarkable, shall I call it celebrity or acumen, with which you solved the mystery of Metzer's death and placed the murderer behind the bars. It is really remarkable, Inspector. So remarkable, in fact, that it's almost suspicious. Don't you think so? No? Well, that's what Mr. Carruthers was good enough to bring you up here to talk over, in an intimate and confidential way, you know." Inspector Clayton surged up from his chair to his feet, his fists clenched, the red sweeping over his face, and then he shook one fist at Carruthers. "So that's your game, is it?" he stormed. "Trying to crawl out of that 25,000 reward, eh? And as for you," he turned on Jimmie Dale, "you've rigged up a nice little plant between you, eh? Well, it won't work, and I'll make you squirm for this, both of you, damn you, before I'm through." He glared from one to the other for a moment, then swung on his heel. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he sneered, as he started for the door. He was halfway across the room before Jimmie Dale spoke. "Clayton?" Clayton turned. Jimmie Dale was still leaning over the desk, but now one elbow was propped upon it, and in the most casual way a revolver covered Inspector Clayton. "If you attempt to leave this room," said Jimmie Dale, without raising his voice, "I assure you that I shall fire with as little compunction as though I were aiming at a mad dog, and I apologize to all mad dogs for coupling your name with them." His voice rang suddenly cold. "Come back here and sit down in that chair." The color ebbed slowly from Clayton's face. He hesitated, then sullenly retraced his steps, hesitated again as he reached the chair, and finally sat down. What do you mean by this?" he stammered, trying to bluster. "Just this," said Jimmie Dale, "that I accuse you of the murder of Jake Metzer. It was you who murdered Metzer." "Good God!" burst suddenly from Carruthers. "You lie!" yelled Clayton, and again he surged up from his chair. "That is what Stace Morse said," said Jimmie Dale coolly. "Sit down." Then Clayton tried to laugh. You're having a joke, ain't you? It was Stace. I can prove it. Come down to headquarters and I can prove it. I got the goods on him all the way. I tell you," his voice rose shrilly, "it was Stace Morse." "You are a despicable hound," said Jimmie Dale through set lips. "Here," he handed the revolver over to Carruthers. "Keep him covered, Carruthers. You're going to the chair for this, Clayton," he said in a fierce monotone. "The chair! You can't send another there in your place this time. Shall I draw you now, true to life? You've been grafting for years on every disreputable den in your district. Metzer was going to show you up, and so, Metzer being in the road, you removed him. And you seized on the fact of Stace Morse having paid a visit to him this afternoon to fix the crime on Stace Morse. Proofs? Oh, yes, I know you've manufactured proofs enough to convict him. If there weren't stronger proofs to convict you." "Convict me!" Clayton's lower jaw hung loosely, but still he made an effort to bluster. "You haven't a thing on me, not a thing, not a thing." Jimmie Dale smiled again, unpleasantly. "You are quite wrong, Clayton. See here." He took a sheet of paper from the drawer of his desk. Clayton reached for it quickly. "What is it?" he demanded. Jimmie Dale drew it back out of reach. "Just a minute," he said softly. "You remember, don't you, that in the presence of Carruthers here, of myself, and of half a dozen reporters, you stated that you had been alone with Metzer in his room at 3 o'clock yesterday, and that it was you, alone, who found the body later on at 9 o'clock? Yes? I mention this simply to show that from your own lips the evidence is complete that you had an opportunity to commit the crime. Now you may look at this, Clayton." He handed over the sheet of paper. Clayton took it, stared at it, turning it over from first one side to the other. Then a sort of relief seemed to come to him, and he gulped. "Nothing but a damned piece of blank paper." Jimmie Dale reached over and took back the sheet. "You're wrong again, Clayton," he said calmly. "It was quite blank before I handed it to you, but not now. I noticed yesterday that your hands were generally moist. I am sure they are more so now. Excitement, you know. Carruthers, see that he doesn't interrupt." From a drawer, Jimmie Dale took out a little black bottle, the notebook he had used the day before, and the photograph Carruthers had sent him. On the sheet of paper Clayton had just handled, Jimmie Dale sprinkled a little powder from the bottle. "Lampblack," explained Jimmie Dale. He shook the paper carefully, allowing the loose powder to fall on the desk blotter, and held out the sheet toward Clayton. "Rather neat, isn't it? A very good impression, too. Your thumbprint, Clayton. Now don't move. You may look, not touch." He laid the paper down on the desk in front of Clayton. Beside it he placed the notebook, opened at the sketch, a black thumbprint now upon it. "You recall handling this yesterday, I'm sure, Clayton. I tried the same experiment with the lampblack on it this morning. You see? And this," beside the notebook he placed the police photograph, that, too, in its enlargement, showed, sharply defined, a thumbprint on a diamond-shaped background. "You will no doubt recognize it as an official photograph, enlarged, taken of the gray seal on Metzer's forehead, and the thumbprint of Metzer's murderer. You have only to glance at the little scar at the edge of the center loop to satisfy yourself that the three are identical. Of course, there are a dozen other points of similarity equally indisputable, but—" Jimmie Dale stopped. Clayton was on his feet, rocking on his feet. His face was deathlike in its pallor. Moisture was oozing from his forehead. "I didn't do it! I didn't do it!" he cried out wildly. "My God, I tell you, I didn't do it! And that would send me to the chair!" "Yes," said Jimmie Dale coldly, "and that's precisely where you're going, to the chair." The man was beside himself now, racked to the soul by a paroxysm of fear. I'm innocent! Innocent!" he screamed out. "Oh, for God's sake, don't send an innocent man to his death! It was Stace Morse. Listen, listen, I'll tell you the truth." He was clawing with his hands piteously over the desk at Jimmie Dale. "When the big rewards came out last week, I stole one of the gray seals from the bunch at headquarters to use it the first time any crime was committed when I was sure I could lay my hands on the man who did it. Don't you see? Of course he'd deny he was the Gray Seal, just as he'd denied that he was guilty. But I'd have the proof both ways, and I'd collect the rewards, and The man collapsed into the chair. Carruthers was up from his seat, his hands gripping tight on the edge of the desk as he leaned over it. "Jimmie, Jimmie, what does this mean?" he gasped out. Jimmie Dale smiled, pleasantly now. "That he has told the truth," said Jimmie Dale quietly. "It is quite true that Stace Morse committed the murder. Shows up the value of circumstantial evidence, though, doesn't it? This would certainly have got him off, and convicted Clayton here before any jury in the land. But the point is, Carruthers, that Stace Morse isn't the Gray Seal, and the Gray Seal is not a murderer." Clayton looked up. You believe me?" he stammered eagerly. Jimmie Dale whirled on him in a sudden sweep of passion. "No, you cur!" he flashed. "It's not you I believe. I simply wanted your confession before witnesses." He whipped the 3 written sheets from his pocket. "Here, substantially, is that confession written out." He passed it to Carruthers. "Read it to him, Carruthers." Carruthers read it aloud. "Now," said Jimmie Dale grimly, "this spells ruin for you, Clayton. You don't deserve a chance to escape prison bars, but I'm going to give you one, for you're going to get it pretty stiff anyhow. If you refuse to sign this, I'll hand you over to the district attorney in half an hour, and Carruthers and I will swear to your confession. On the other hand, if you sign it, Carruthers will not be able to print it until tomorrow morning, and that gives you something like 14 hours to put distance between yourself and New York. Here is a pen. If you are quick enough to take us by surprise once you have signed, you might succeed in making a dash for that door and effecting your escape without forcing us to compound a felony. Understand?" Clayton's hand trembled violently as he seized the pen. He scrawled his name, looked from one to the other, wet his lips, and then, taking Jimmie Dale at his word, rushed for the door, and the door slammed behind him. Carruthers' face was hard. "What did you let him go for, Jimmie?" he said uncompromisingly. "Selfishness, pure selfishness," said Jimmie Dale softly. "They'd guy me unmercifully if they ever heard of it at the St. James Club. The honor is all yours, Carruthers. I don't appear on the stage. That's understood? Yes? Well, then," he handed over the signed confession. "Is the scoop big enough?" Carruthers fingered the sheets, but his eyes in a bewildered way searched Jimmie Dale's face. "Big enough?" he echoed as though invoking the universe. "It's the biggest thing the newspaper game has ever known. But how did you come to do it? What started you? Where did you get your lead?" "Why, from you, I guess, Carruthers," Jimmie Dale answered thoughtfully, with artfully puckered brow. "I remembered that you had said last week that the Gray Seal never left finger marks on his work, and I saw one on the seal on Metzer's forehead. Then, you know, I lifted one corner where the seal overlapped a thread of blood, and underneath the thread of blood wasn't in the slightest disturbed. So, of course, I knew the seal had been put on quite a long time after the man was dead. Not until the blood had dried thoroughly, to a crust, you know, so that even the damp surface of the sticky side of the seal hadn't affected it. And then I took a dislike to Clayton somehow, and put 2 and 2 together, and took a flyer in getting him to handle the notebook. I guess that's all. No other reason on earth. Jolly lucky, don't you think?" Carruthers didn't say anything for a moment. When he spoke, it was irrelevantly. "You saved me $25,000 on that reward, Jimmie." "That's the only thing I regret," said Jimmie Dale brightly. "It wasn't nice of you, Carruthers, to turn on the Gray Seal that way, and it strikes me you owe the chap, whoever he is, a pretty emphatic exoneration after what you said in this morning's edition." "Jimmie," said Carruthers earnestly, "you know what I thought of him before. It's like a new lease of life to get back one's faith in him. You leave it to me. I'll put the Gray Seal on a pedestal tomorrow that will be worthy of the immortals. You leave it to me." And Carruthers kept his word. Also, before the paper had been an hour off the press, Carruthers received a letter. It thanked Carruthers quite genuinely, even if couched in somewhat facetious terms, for his sweeping vindication, twitted him gently for his backsliding, begged to remain his gratefully, and in lieu of signature there was a gray-colored piece of paper shaped like this, a diamond shape, only there were no fingerprints on it. End of Part 1, Chapter 2.